Two sentries were posted on the road leading to the section of the base under U.S. jurisdiction. They were huge, each man carrying a high-power rifle and arms as big around as my thighs. Their physiques made them look like suits of armor on display. They didn't have to say a word to let passers-by know who was in charge. Cluster bombs could have rained from the sky, and these guys would have held their ground, unblinking, until they received direct orders to do otherwise. If you kept them in the corner of your eye and headed for the main gate, you'd be on the path I'd taken when I tried going AWOL, on my third try through the loop. Running would be easy. And I could probably avoid the Mimic ambush and make it to Chiba City. But today I had another objective in mind. It was 10:29. I was standing in the sentry's blind spot, with my 80-centimeter stride. The sentries were exactly 15 seconds from where I stood. A gull flew overhead. The distant roar of the sea blended with the sounds of the base. My shadow was a small pool collected at my feet. There was no one else on the path. An American fuel truck passed by. The sentry saluted. I had to time my walk just right. 3, 2, 1. The truck approached, fork in the road. An old cleaning lady carrying a mop stepped out in front of the truck. Brakes squealed. The truck's engine stalled. The sentries turned toward the commotion, their attentions diverted for a few precious moments. I walked right by. I could feel the heat cast by their sheer bulk. With muscles like that, I had no doubt they could reach out my ass and yank out my spine. For an instant, I felt an irrational desire to lash out against them. Sure, I might look like I'd blow over in a stiff wind, but you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. Want to try me? Who wants a piece of the little Asian recruit? Would the skills I'd learned to pilot a jacket translate to hand-to-hand combat against another human? Had I gotten any stronger, any better? Why wait for the mimics? Why not test myself on these fine specimens now? The guard on the right turned. Stay calm. Keep your pace steady. He's pivoting to the left. When he does, you'll slip into his blind spot behind the older sentry. By the time he looks around for any signs of Keiji Kariya, I'll be part of the scenery. Did you see something? Quiet. Captain's watching, and he doesn't look happy. Screw you. And like that, I'd infiltrated U.S. territory. My target was a U.S.-made jacket. After a few times through the loop, I'd come to the conclusion that I needed a new weapon, something we didn't have in the Japanese corps. The standard-issue 20mm rifles weren't very effective against mimics. They walked a thin line of compromise between the number of rounds a soldier could carry, the rate of fire necessary to hit a fast-moving target, and the acceptable amount of recoil. They were more powerful than the weapons they used to issue, but if you really wanted to pierce that endoskeleton, 50mm was the only way to be sure. The basic UTF strategy was to employ a line of prone armored infantry firing 20mm rounds to slow the enemy enough so that artillery and tanks could take them out. In practice, the support never came fast or heavy enough. It fell to us to finish the mimics on our own. The weapon of last resort for the old-timers, and one I'd use myself, was the pile driver mounted on the left shoulder. You could punch open a hole and spill a mimic's guts with one of those babies. The rocket launcher could come in handy too, but it was hard to score a hit with, and more often than not you'd be out of rockets when you really needed one. As I grew accustomed to the fighting, I relied more and more on the power of the 57mm pile driver. But the pile driver had one major drawback. Its magazine only held 20 charges. Unlike our rifles, you couldn't change magazines either. Once you fired that 20th round, you were finished. At best, a soldier was going to punch 20 holes in something. Once the pile driver was out of charges, you couldn't even use it to drive a stake into the heart of a vampire. The people who designed the jacket just hadn't considered the possibility that someone would survive long enough in hand-to-hand combat with a mimic to use more than 20 rounds. Screw that. Running out of charges had killed me plenty of times. Another dead end. The only way to avoid it was to find a melee weapon that didn't run out of ammo. I'd seen one once, in the battle that had started this whole loop. But the pile driver had one major drawback. Its magazine only held 20 charges. Unlike our rifles, you couldn't change magazines either. Once you fired that 20th round, you were finished. At best, a soldier was going to punch 20 holes in something. Once the pile driver was out of charges, you couldn't even use it to drive a stake into the heart of a vampire. The people who designed the jacket just hadn't considered the possibility that someone would survive long enough in hand-to-hand combat with a mimic to use more than 20 rounds. Screw that. Running out of charges had killed me plenty of times. Another dead end. The only way to avoid it was to find a melee weapon that didn't run out of ammo. I'd seen one once, in the battle that had started this whole loop. The battle axe. Rita Vertasky, a Valkyrie clad in a crimson jacket, and her axe. It might have been more appropriate to call it a slab of tungsten carbide, in the shape of an axe. A battle axe never ran out of ammo. You could still use it if it got bent. It packed plenty of punch. It was the perfect melee weapon. But as far as the world was concerned, Keiji Kriya was a new recruit who had yet to see his first battle. If I asked him to replace my standard issue pile driver with a different weapon simply because I didn't like it, they sure as hell weren't going to listen. Yonabaru had laughed at me, and Farrell actually threw a punch. When I tried taking it straight to our platoon commander, he ignored me completely. I was going to have to acquire the weapon I needed on my own. I headed for the barracks of the supply division that had accompanied U.S. Special Forces. 5 minutes after crossing into the U.S. side of the base, I came to a spot guarded by only one soldier. She was twirling a monkey wrench in her hand. The pungent scent of oil drifted in the air, swamping the ocean's briny tang. The ever-present drone of men bustling about the base had receded. In the darkness of the barracks, the steel weapons humanity used to strike down its enemies were enjoying a short nap. The woman with the wrench was Shasta Rail, a civilian tech. Her pay was at least on par with a first lieutenant, way above mine at any rate. I'd snuck a look at her papers. Height, 152 centimeters. Weight, 37 kilograms. Visual acuity, 2300. Favorite food, passion fruit cake. She had some American Indian blood in her and wore her black hair pulled back in a ponytail. If Rita was a lynx on the prowl, Shasta was an unsuspecting rabbit. She belonged at home, curled up in a warm, cozy room watching vids and stuffing her face with bonbons, not smeared with oil and grease on some military base. I spoke as gently as I could. Hello. Shasta jumped up to the sound of my voice. Damn. Not gentle enough. Her thick glasses fell to the concrete floor. Watching her look for those glasses was like watching a quadriplegic tread water. Instead of putting down the monkey wrench and feeling for them with both hands, she groped in vain with just the one. Not exactly what you'd expect from someone who'd graduated top of her class at MIT. Developed some of the most advanced military jackets at her first defense industry research post. And then, for an encore, leapt into the UDF as the crack technician assigned to a particular gunmetal red jacket.